Thanks so much for checking out my show. Really appreciate everybody. Thank you, everybody, for supporting my channel. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed. The mystery has really.
Cinematic drone shot pushing slowly over the dark, murky waters of the Mississippi Sound at twilight, transitioning to a desolate, wind-swept stretch of Horn Island. Moody, atmospheric lighting with low-frequency ambient synth hums. Voiceover. The Gulf Coast of Mississippi is a place of deep contrasts. On a clear July day, the barrier islands look like paradise, sun-drenched white sand, gentle Gulf breezes and emerald waters. But paradise can change its face in a heartbeat. On July 4th, 18-year-old Nolan Wells, a rising college athlete, a fierce competitor, and by all accounts, a young man with a blindingly bright future, took a boat out to the remote shores of Horn Island. He never came back. Welcome back to the show. I'm incredibly grateful for everyone tuning in, subscribing, and supporting the channel as we chase the truth behind these complex cases. Today we are diving deep into a tragedy that has left a grieving family, independent legal teams, and federal investigators locked in a high-stakes battle for answers. Because what started out as a 4th of July celebration has unraveled into a tangled web of shifting timelines, missing digital footprints, and a grieving family who refuses to let the official narrative stand. To understand where this investigation stands right now, we have to strip away the noise and look strictly at the mechanics of that day. According to flight and marine data obtained exclusively through the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the vessel carrying Nolan and his group left the mainland dock at precisely 9:56 a.m. on July 4th. They arrived at Horn Island around 11:14 a.m. For hours it was a typical summer island trip. Friends, sun, and celebration. But as the afternoon wore on, the official narrative provided by the surviving friends begins to fracture. Around 3 p.m. the group prepares to head back to the mainland. This is where the story shifts. The friends claim that Nolan decided to stay behind. They stated that he had met a young woman earlier in the day, someone he had reportedly just crossed paths with for the very first time, and that he opted to remain on the remote island while the rest of the group took the boat home. They departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m., arriving back at the original departure dock later that evening. Except, according to Nolan's parents, the idea that their son would willingly strand himself on a remote barrier island without his primary ride home defies everything they knew about him. He wasn't reckless with his safety. He was a disciplined athlete. And more importantly, he was a strong swimmer, a detail that adds an eerie, haunting layer to what happened next. Tragically, just 2 days later, Nolan's body was discovered on the island by a National Park Service ranger. The premature declaration and the family's fight. Voiceover. Now, in any standard investigation, the immediate aftermath sets the tone. But right out of the gate, local authorities made a move that sent shockwaves through the legal community. Before a comprehensive autopsy was finalized, before toxicology reports could be processed, and before the digital evidence could even be extracted, local law enforcement came out with a public declaration. There is no indication of foul play. For a family whose world had just been shattered, that premature statement wasn't just careless. It was an invitation to deep, unyielding scrutiny. Enter renowned civil rights and high-profile attorney Ben Crump, alongside legal strategist Eric Hurst, who stepped in to represent the Wells family. They quickly realized that relying solely on the local department's initial findings wasn't going to cut it. When Crump and the family met with the district attorney, they walked away with a monumental agreement. A grand jury will ultimately review the case once all evidence is compiled. But even more significant is what is happening right now behind the scenes with Nolan's cell phone. The digital mystery and the dual investigation. Voiceover. In modern criminal investigations, a cell phone isn't just a communication device. It is the digital ghost of a victim's final hours. It holds GPS pings, encrypted messages, deleted caches, and proximity timelines. Here is where this case takes a truly unusual turn. According to open-source reports and legal statements, the phone wasn't initially sitting securely in police custody. The family had to track it down. And when they got a look at it, red flags immediately went up. Accounts like Snapchat, platforms where an 18-year-old like Nolan was active, appeared completely wiped for that entire day. Was it a glitch? Or was it evidence spoliation? Because of these deep inconsistencies, the legal team didn't just hand the device over and walk away. They negotiated a mutual inspection. That means official investigators, including the sheriff's office and the FBI, will examine the device, but alongside independent forensic experts hired by the family. Former law enforcement and federal digital forensic specialists are stepping in to ensure that every single deleted file, every server-side ping, and every metadata trace is recovered. As former FBI agent Kieran Ramsey noted when discussing cases like this, a forensic image should have been taken immediately, but given the desperate circumstances these parents faced just trying to find their son, it's a track that speaks to the intense need for transparency when public trust begins to fray. We established the core mystery: a sun-drenched 4th of July trip to Horn Island, a sudden parting of ways, a body found 2 days later, and a local police department that rushed to declare no foul play before the digital dust had even settled. But as any veteran investigator will tell you, a false narrative can only hold weight until the actual data starts talking. And recently, that data has begun to scream. Just hours after the initial press conferences, new audio surfaced from emergency and marine radio traffic on that fateful day. Listen closely to what investigators are now scrambling to verify. Reports indicate that a call went out from the water involving a boat taking on water, signaling mechanical issues and requesting emergency towing assistance. From an investigative standpoint, this changes the physics of the timeline. If the vessel carrying the group was experiencing mechanical distress, or if there was frantic communication happening off the island, it completely alters the tidy narrative that everyone simply packed up, waved goodbye, and left Nolan happily chatting with a stranger on the beach. 7 to 1500 hours, the witness wall and the fear of coming forward. Of course, audio clips and marine logs are only as good as the people willing to explain them. And down on the Gulf Coast, getting teenagers and young adults to talk to law enforcement is turning into a massive hurdle. Think about the environment. It's a group of young people, jet skis, boats, parties, and summer freedom. When tragedy strikes and federal agents start knocking on doors, the natural human reaction isn't cooperation. It's pure, unfiltered panic. Legal teams have noted that dozens of tips are flooding in daily. Some witnesses are calling independent legal investigators directly because they are too intimidated to walk into a local sheriff's station. They were on the island. They saw who was arguing, who was drinking, and whose timeline didn't match the statements given to ABC and CBS News. Tristan Shepard, one of the friends who was on the trip, came forward to defend the group publicly, stating, "We did no wrong here and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind us. We all cared and loved Nolan. Yet, loving someone and telling the complete truth under oath are two entirely different things." Legal experts are reminding the public that withholding material information or lying to investigators isn't just a social misstep. It carries severe legal repercussions. When you have a timeline filled with contradictions, every silent witness becomes a potential puzzle piece. 15 to 2200 hours, the federal footprint. Why the FBI stepped in. As the pressure mounts locally, a heavy federal shadow has fallen over the investigation. The FBI is now actively involved alongside Jackson County authorities. Naturally, when the Bureau gets called in, the public immediately jumps to conclusions. Is it a homicide? Is a federal indictment coming down? According to former federal agents who know the terrain, the reality is a bit more procedural. Horn Island isn't just a local beach, it is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. It is federal land. When a deceased body is discovered on a National Park Service property by a federal ranger, jurisdictions automatically overlap. But the FBI's presence isn't just about geography, it's about capability. Local police departments often lack the advanced digital infrastructure required to pull deep forensic data from wiped applications, cloud backups, and cell tower dumps. When the FBI steps in, they bring elite digital forensics units that can reconstruct a digital footprint even when a user thinks they've hit the permanent delete button. 2200 hours 30:00, the Life 360 paradox and cell tower dumps. Voiceover. Let's look closer at the digital battlefield, Nolan's cell phone. According to open-source reports and family statements, while the friends claimed Nolan's phone was left behind on the boat because teenagers don't want their phones getting wet, the physical reality of the technology tells a conflicting story. Data from applications like Life 360 and cellular tower pings are being cross-referenced with the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracking logs. Imagine an invisible grid overlaying the Gulf of Mexico. Every single cell phone on Horn Island that day pinged local towers. Investigators are running massive cell tower dumps, essentially creating a digital census of every device present on the island during those hours. If a friend claims they were sitting next to Nolan at a specific time, but the cell tower data shows their handset moving across the water or disconnecting from the local relay while another device stayed put, the entire alibi collapses. And what about Snapchat? Reports suggest that Nolan's Snapchat account was entirely wiped for that day. But as digital forensic investigators know all too well, deleted is never truly deleted. Server-side data requests, preservation letters sent directly to corporate headquarters, and metadata recovery mean that even if the app looks clean on the handset, the digital footprints left on external servers remain intact. The anatomy of a premature declaration. Which brings us back to the single biggest misstep of this entire tragedy: the Sheriff Department's early press release claiming zero indication of foul play. Why do departments rush to make those statements? Sometimes it's an attempt to calm public panic in a tight-knit tourist community. Sometimes it's sheer institutional hubris. Whatever the reason, it created an unfixable credibility gap. As former FBI agent Kieran Ramsey pointed out, you certainly never characterize cause and manner of death before an autopsy, before toxicology. That's just standard law enforcement 101. Whatever the reason behind that misstep, that department no doubt regrets making it. When law enforcement locks themselves into a premature conclusion, grieving parents are forced to become private investigators. They have to hunt down their son's phone, pay out of pocket for independent autopsies, funded in part by public figures like former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, and hire high-powered legal teams just to ensure the state does its job. Welcome back to our continuing investigation into the tragic death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells. If you've followed us through parts 1 and 2, you know the landscape. A remote barrier island, a fractured timeline from a group of surviving friends, a disputed cell phone recovery, and a local police department that tried to close the book before the pages were even printed. Now, we have to look at the physical evidence, or rather, the battle over what actually caused Nolan's death. Following the discovery of his body 2 days after he went missing, local officials initiated their protocols. But because public trust had already been eroded by that premature, no foul play declaration, the family took matters into their own hands. A private autopsy was commissioned, taking place all the way in Washington, D.C. And this is where the cultural weight of this case truly reveals itself. High-profile figures stepped into the fray to ensure financial barriers wouldn't block the search for truth. Former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick stepped up to help fund the private autopsy expenses, while entertainment icon Tyler Perry assisted with the family's funeral costs. When celebrities and civil rights attorneys enter a local drowning case, it signals a massive shift. The family's fight for transparency has officially become a national movement. This brings us to one of the most stubborn physical mysteries of the entire case: Nolan's capabilities in the water. From the very beginning, Nolan's parents have hammered home a crucial detail. Their son was not just a casual beachgoer, he was an athletic, highly capable, strong swimmer. He was a multi-sport college athlete preparing for the next level of his training program. When a family hears that their experienced, physically fit son drowned in relatively shallow or manageable coastal waters, the psychological barrier to accepting that explanation is immense. Law enforcement and veteran investigators often view these claims with a split perspective. On one hand, an experienced investigator knows that nature doesn't care how good of a swimmer you are. A sudden rip current, an exhaustion-induced cramp, or unexpected medical distress can pull down even the strongest athlete. On the other hand, seasoned detectives also know that parental intuition is often a finely tuned instrument. When a parent says, "My son would never do that," or "My son wouldn't have stayed behind," it forces investigators to look past the lazy assumption of a simple accident and examine whether human intervention played a role. As former FBI agent Kieran Ramsey noted when balancing the friction between family grief and cold procedure, "As a dad, I'd like to think I know for sure what my kids are doing. But as an investigator, you trust but you verify. You don't prove them right or wrong, you find out what actually happened." While the independent medical examiners and federal forensic teams parse through toxicology reports and tissue samples, a parallel investigation has been raging in the worst possible place: the internet. In the modern era of true crime, every high-profile tragedy instantly spawns an army of armchair detectives, TikTok sleuths, and Twitter analysts. In Nolan's case, the digital noise quickly became a deafening distraction. Even during official press conferences, legal teams had to actively correct the record. Photos from completely unrelated pool parties were circulated online as proof of what happened on Horn Island. Old timelines were recycled, fabricated rumors about altercations went viral, and social media commentators began treating a real human tragedy like an interactive video game. Investigators warned that while open-source intelligence can sometimes yield genuine leads, letting social media dictate the narrative is a dangerous trap. Rumors are not evidence. Clicks are not corroboration. For the Wells family, wading through a sea of online conspiracy theories while trying to grieve their son has added an unbearable layer of psychological torture. That is precisely why the official findings, the toxicology reports, the cellular telemetry and the grand jury review, are the only things that will ultimately pierce through the fog of internet fiction. 2400 hours, 32:00. The anatomy of evidence spoliation. Voiceover. Let's return to the core piece of physical evidence that keeps drawing the eyes of every seasoned investigator: the cell phone. When a teenager's phone is found on a boat without the teenager, standard protocol dictates immediate seizure, preservation, and a locked chain of custody by law enforcement. Instead, we had a scenario where the family had to track down the device themselves, and vital historical data, like daily Snapchat activity, appeared meticulously wiped. In legal terms, this flirts heavily with the concept of evidence spoliation, the intentional destruction, alteration, or failure to preserve evidence relevant to a legal proceeding. If a device is intentionally scrubbed of its day of logs, or if communications between friends on that boat are systematically deleted before authorities can image the hardware, it transforms a tragic drowning inquiry into something much darker. Fortunately, as we explored earlier, digital footprints rarely vanish into thin air. Server-side preservation letters sent to tech giants, cloud backups, cell tower pings, and Life 360 location histories create a multi-layered net. Even if a local department misses a step, federal digital forensic units possess the tools to reconstruct what apps were opened, who was messaged, and whose timeline lines up with reality. Explore the evidence firsthand.